Okay, we're live.
We're live. Okay. All right, everybody. So it is 5 o'clock and we are going to begin tonight's Conservation Commission meeting. I'd like to remind everybody to please put your cell phones on silent. If you need to have conversation, please leave the room so that you don't distract others. This meeting is being recorded. And if anybody else is recording the meeting, please let us know. We will begin tonight's public meeting with appointment of officers.
I move to appoint Ashley Arisman as chair. Second.
All right, so we can vote on that. We don't need roll call vote tonight for the first time in a year. So aye.
Aye.
So that carries unanimously. Nomination for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Ian Golding.
I'll second.
All right, seconded. So all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that carries. Thank you, everybody. And that brings us to public comment on items not being heard this evening. Jeff?
Just real quickly, Erica Mooney asked me to remind everyone to be sure that you speak clearly into your microphones. Now that we're all back in person and on mics. And just for tonight, anyone that does come to present or comment, the only working microphone is the one behind Terry. So please, if you have comments, please come up and use that, identify yourself, and then you can do what you need to do.
Thank you for that reminder.
No problem. It's been a while since we've had to use microphones,
That
so
is true.
we're all out of practice.
All right, so public comment.
I just talking for the record. I have much regret for not pulling my papers again. No, I just came here to say thank you. Because we didn't have the in-person meeting, I have gifts for you guys, and then I gotta go catch a boat, so.
Oh, no. Oh, man. Thank you so much.
You're so kind, Joe.
Candy? Is it candy?
No.
I think we'll just lock the door, Joe, and leave you here. Make sure
Oh,
you can't
nice.
get away. Thank you, sir. Wow.
As long as it's not that roll of money we kept talking about.
Makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
You don't get one.
Here, we,
We all can open it at once.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe, if you could just give Seth's to Joanne and we'll be sure that he gets it.
Opening party?
I- I guess we can, Joe, should we open them now or wait? Okay, we'll open them.
Not taking.
Oh, my gosh. This is beautiful.
Wow.
Thank you, Joe. So beautiful.
I'm gonna drink.
Joseph, we'll have to drink to you at some future date. Thank you.
Although, is it symbolic at all that mine's a man war jellyfish?
Mine is two more. If it makes you feel any better. Mine
Thank
is
you,
also
Joe.
jellyfish, too.
Oh,
That was fun. Any other public comment tonight?
The bar is very high now.
I know the bar is very high. This is the first. Okay, so the following items are continued this evening. We have NISDA at 55 Walwinet Road, continued until July 22nd. We have Nantucket Conservation Foundation Ram Pasture, continued until July 22nd. Under certificates of compliance, we have Minsk's, can't pronounce that one, at 51 Crooked Lane, continued until July 22nd. We have Barberry, continued until July 22nd. And then under extension orders of conditions, we have Nantucket Land Council, at Nantucket Harbor, continued until August 12th. So with that, we will begin tonight's meeting. Under notices of intent, we have Lower Pocomo Nominee Trust at 88 Pocomo Road.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering Survey, along with Mr. Reed. And we're before you tonight with really two notice of intents, and I would leave it up to the commission They're on two adjacent properties, different ownerships, but essentially the same project. So I don't know if you want to take them together or separately. I'll present it all and then, or you tell me.
Yeah.
It's fine to take them together.
We can
Okay.
take them together.
So, thank you. So we are working on the coastal bank out at the end of Pocomo Point on the western side. Essentially, the last two properties, the house formerly known as the Gamble House, and then the vacant lot just to the south of it, which is number 88. And the proposed project includes coastal stabilization using fiber rolls and plantings. So this is essentially the same assemblage of materials, which has been previously permitted by the commission, the so-called Wilkinson array. There's an existing sand drift fence along the frontage of these two properties, which will be removed. We understand that the commission considers as much as they would like to keep it, that if we were to have both, that it would be considered a coastal engineering structure. And so we'll agree to remove that and then follow all of the same protocols as previously approved projects on both sides of Pocomo Point. This property, we have the benefit of access on this property. So you can see I've shown the construction access on the plans, essentially down near that small parking area. The bank gets very low and there's a spot where we can, to the west side of the point, use for machine access down onto the beach. So we can keep all of the activity on the subject parcels. And the way the work would proceed would be to remove the existing fencing, regrade the bank to the extent necessary for the installation of the fiber rolls, and then cover them with clean compatible sand and the planting of the area above the array. We agree to all the same conditions that have been imposed on previous projects in terms of monitoring and sand nourishment requirements. And the last piece of the project that has come up that I would like to add would be that the set of stairs at number 90 has become quite precarious. And so I'd like to provide you with a revised plan for your next meeting, along with a part of addressing any questions or concerns that you may have, which includes the replacement of the stairs that are there, given the condition of them for the beach access, and then a separate set of beach stairs for number 88. And we'll have both architectural details. We've been actually waiting on, given the height of that bank, more actually having civil engineered details for the drawing for the staircase, because they're fairly substantial, as you know, given that height. So we'll provide you with both of those as well. And with that, I'd be happy to address questions, concerns, or comments. And we have requested a waiver, based on long-term net benefit for the project.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
Yeah, Art, I had one question. What is a sand, where is it? A sand lift? It's something, I looked it up and I wasn't sure how that operated. Could you just tell me how that operates?
Yes, absolutely. So that's sort of the piece of the assemblage of materials that we consider to be the Oreo, if you will. So that's taking the coir fabric and going behind the roll, filling it with compacted sand, and then coming back over the roll. And what that does is that interrupts the potential for a failure plane behind the rolls, so that essentially if you were to get any undermining at that beach level or the lowest, you couldn't have essentially complete failure. But it would be coir fabric. It's no different than the design, but that's you take a lift back, it goes back about 6 feet typically, and then put clean sand in, run the compactor, and then wrap the next piece of fabric back over it, and then build your next tier. And there would be 7 tiers with the application that's proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
So I
other
have,
questions? Ian?
yes, Madam Chair. So Art, I went on the town's GIS map, and 88 appears to be a vacant lot, if I read it correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah. and 90, it was built in the 80s. So you're not claiming any statutory right to protection.
No, we are not proposing the project as a coastal engineering structure. We're proposing it as bank stabilization and improving the, as written up in the application, that having a stable vegetated bank furthers the interests protected by the commission.
So I didn't see any qualification for augmenting it with sand to compensate for erosion there. Did I just miss it in the NOI?
I will double check the number, but certainly the intent and the expectation of the conditioned project is that there would be a minimum annual contribution of sand, which is calculated based on, as typically is done, the height of the bank times the annual rate, long-term rate of erosion times the length of the project.
Great, thank you.
Linda?
Being new to this, where are you going to get the sand from?
The sand, through you, Madam Chair,
Yes.
would be sourced from either one of the local pits, another on-island source that would be acceptable to the commission if we were to provide a sample. So if that, as long as the material is considered clean and compatible, or if it was to be barged over, and again, with samples provided to the staff prior to placement and notification as to the source of the sand, of the material.
Through you, Madam Chair,
Yep.
is this something you're going to provide before a decision is rendered as to how the sand is coming, or is this going to be as needed or at the time?
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, typically it's conditioned in the order that, because it might change over time, the initial construction, the source may be, one pit, or with time, if that material may not be available any longer. So, we're amenable to a typical condition requiring that the, notification of the staff, and as well as any information they may require in terms of, I can tell you that other projects that we have, if we use a source that changes, for example, a lot of times the sand was coming from either, the so-called Holgate or Reese pits, then there's sort of a known quantity, and we've given you a sand analysis of those. If there's going to come from another source, then I've gone to the stockpile, put it in a Ziploc and brought it down, and then written a letter as part of the maintenance that that's where it's coming from, and waited for approval.
Yes, go ahead.
I've always wondered about this because I read this thing, and I know you're going to anchor it into the bluff. And does that in itself destabilize the bank?
No, the anchors there's two kinds of anchors that we've used on these projects. We've used helical type anchors, and again, the diameter of those is typically 6 inches or so, or even down to smaller, like 3-inch type of a screw-in anchor that has an eye on it that you can secure to, or what we call a duckbill anchor, which is hammered in and has a cable attached to it. So it's just a small, maybe 1.5 inch diameter. You hammer it in, and then when you tension the cable, the duckbill twists to provide that resistance to pull out. And they're spaced such that, and not so deep that there's any sort of destabilization effect.
Any other questions, Mark?
I have a question for you on the existing sand fence that's there. What's the future hold for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
There's an existing sand fence there now, I believe.
So it would be
The
removed.
zigzag
It would
fence.
be removed, and ideally, if there was another owner that could make use of that with a permit, that would be ideal. Otherwise, it would be disposed of properly.
Is it not working?
I would say that my experience with the sand drift fence is that seasonally it does help to collect windblown sediment but that sediment is often rapidly transported by by water action because of, the fine nature of it. So it doesn't serve to stabilize the toe to a point where you don't have the sliding and the slumping of the vegetation. So we have not been able to typically maintain a consistent vegetated face, just having drift fence along the bottom. So I guess that's a long answer to it. It does not work if you're going to try to have a project that comes in and maintains a vegetated coastal bank, because it doesn't adequately protect the toe and then the slumping.
Was, Madam Chair, may I follow up with on Mark's question, Art? So you were before us for this sand drift fence, what was it, 2 years ago?
I didn't actually permit the fence on
okay.
this particular property, but I'd have to look back at the previous order for how many years that's been there.
So Jeff, has it been 2 years or 3 years? My memory is
That's
getting.
been there a while.
It's
been there. I could
while.
find out for
I'd
sure
say
if you
5
give
or
me a minute.
6 years at least.
That's my sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and it's proved inadequate, you're saying? So there was planting and then the planting has all slumped to the bottom?
I don't believe that I think there was some planting that may have been done in the vicinity of the stairs, but it wasn't a project that included essentially the wholesale vegetation of the coastal bank. But just having the fence there, you still had the natural slumping that was occurring for even the material from the top.
Thank you.
So Art, I have a question, kind of twofold, I guess. So I've been surprised how much material has been removed from these projects when the grade is corrected. Do you guys have, or have you been able to quantify how much material, like how many cubic feet of material would need to be removed to correct that grade?
I could certainly come up with an estimated calculation. What I could tell you is that we never actually remove material. We reposition it, if you will. And what happens with the grading, and on the plan, I show, a line of where we think the top of the bank actually will come back to. And then that material is what is used to create the lifts that were previously discussed. So if we were to leave the bank at the current angle, it's not at its natural angle of repose and is therefore essentially unstable. So as part of this installation, we never want to cut it back any further than necessary just for stability. And then the way that the system is designed is essentially that when you put the bank essentially back together for planting a stable surface, it rests on the top fiber roll so that you, again, going back to the failure plane discussion, that you don't have that the entire face of that bank and the plantings that you've installed can't slide past it. So we could come up with an estimated volume, much like the sand volume for the annual nourishment for you.
Okay, that would be great. And then
But it's not removed, just to be clear. We've
It
never
stays
taken
on site.
anything. And I think if I may just expand a little bit, I think that goes a lot towards that we're using the material that's naturally occurring to the extent possible, as well as I see these projects as this is a time to sort of set it where it can be maintained in a more stable position. And if we were to have the fiber rolls further seaward and not do that regrading, then you'd have to bring in a lot of material. And then you're also that much further towards the tides, and it makes the maintenance of the cover that much more difficult.
Okay. And then my kind of second question along with that is, I actually saw bank swallows in this area right to the north of those defunct stairs this spring and early summer, just like now. Have you guys done any surveys for bank swallows? Because they are kind of, with all of the erosion control in that area, their homes are being lost. And I worry that I actually did see an active site there.
We did not look at that, no.
Okay, is that something you might be able to look into?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a question, Linda?
Our stupid question, having dealt with most of the houses on Baxter Road. HCC dealt with this house a long time ago. It was either going to be destroyed or it was going to be moved back, and then it was going to be moved across the street, you know, across the access to Pocomo. It's still sitting where it was. Has there been any discussion about moving? You have room to move it back. Has there been any discussion about picking this thing up and moving it back?
It has been
Yeah.
They did move it back once?
Mhm.
Yeah, because you
It's
still have a
under
little bit of
construction
room to go.
right now. And it has been
Yeah. it's in the location
relocated.
That's been permitted and is,
But there's no discussion about moving it back. You've got about maybe probably 40 feet to get to the way. No discussion about moving it further.
not beyond what's already been approved
Okay.
and what's been done. No.
Because it's run out of room on the water side. It's run out of room on the water side again.
Yeah, it's, if you drive out there, it's pretty active construction site.
The original plan of the HCC was to demolish it. Which the HCC took 5 minutes and said, yes, here, please go. Here's your permit.
Well, it is still there.
It's still there.
Yes. Any other questions, Mark?
All right, what's the history of the bank erosion for this Pocomo Bluff?
You mean the rate of erosion?
Yes.
I'll provide some more detail on that, including with the volume calculations, but my past experience for just speaking generally to this area is typically on the 10 inches to maybe 1 foot type of a rate.
Thank you. Art. Do you have a follow-up?
Well, I do
Ian?
actually, and thank you, Linda, for pointing that out, because it does look as though there's considerable room to move it back still. And I wonder if you would address that for us when you come back, please.
I'm sorry, just so that I could be clear, you're asking us to provide information as to if there's additional area on the lot for the
Yes.
structure to be relocated again?
Yes. Because it looks as though you've got 40 or 50 feet. I can't really tell from the drawings you gave us.
Art, I have one more question about the access point. I'm a little concerned about heavy machinery coming down from that point and turning constantly to get to that site and
Mhm.
just how that will be monitored. Because I've realized with one of the other kind of Pocomo installations, it was like months of machine traffic going down there. And I am a little bit worried about how that beach will be monitored profile wise to make sure that we're not, you know, creating kind of holes in there from machines turning.
We can work on that a little bit more, perhaps provide a monitoring protocol, as well as it's probably an area that would be good to have some supplemental sand to create, you know, that ramp and carry it out a little bit, but we can expand on that in the response.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners before we open it to the public? Linda?
I'm looking at the aerial. All right, I assume that access point is at all the way at the northwest corner of this lot, where after you go down the hill towards Pocomo, you turn right at the bottom of that hill and then come back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because I can see where the access is.
I think pedestrians use that access a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I
Yeah.
did have an answer. The original Sandra fencing on these lots was permitted in 2012.
2012. Okay. So almost 10
Sorry, Ian.
years. They're old. All right, so at this point, we will open it up for public comment. If you are coming up to comment, just remember to use this microphone. Please state your name, and if you are, you know, in a butter, please, you know, state your property. RJ?
RJ Turcott for the Nantucket Land Council. Just to reiterate your point, Chairman, there are bank swallows there. And as far as this project and any of the other ones that the commission looks at going forward, be careful with long-term net benefit. vegetating every bank on the island isn't necessarily beneficial. There's a lot of species like the bank swallows that find the bare bank useful and eroding bank useful. And if we left this bank alone, it would remain eroding. So this is probably permittable under the first, which is no reasonable alternative, but I'd caution against permitting it under long-term net benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Okay. So if there are no other comments or questions from commissioners, Art, would you like to continue?
Yes, both applications to the next meeting, please.
Okay, so Lower Pocomo Nominee Trust and Pocomo Point Realty Trust will continue until July 22nd.
Yes, please.
All right.
And Madam Chair, I was not involved in the permitting of the original quarrels. You mentioned earlier that I need some history on that. If we could provide that for us. Thank you, Art.
We don't need a motion to continue, no. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. So that brings us to Sconset Trust Incorporated Linden Avenue right-of-way. I'm assuming we just need to make a motion to accept the withdrawal.
Yes, they requested a withdrawal in writing today for that application.
Okay,
So move.
okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, that carries unanimously. That moves us on to 10 Moores End Lane Realty Trust at 10 Moores End Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Arthur Gasparo, Nantucket Engineering for the applicant. The project before you tonight is for work within the 100-foot buffer zone to a vegetated wetland off of near the end of Moore's End Lane. And the wetland boundary was delineated by Brian Madden of LEC. There is a fairly substantial topographic change on this property and significant sort of hill, if you will, down towards the wetland. The project includes the installation of a swimming pool and some landscaping within the 100-foot buffer zone. The pool and all structural elements would be outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. The bottom of the pool is more than 2 feet above the estimated seasonal high groundwater elevation, again, going back to the fairly substantial for Nantucket, if you will, grade change that happens there. We're able to maintain that. And there's no work that's proposed within the 25-foot buffer zone. So we have not requested any waivers for the project.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Any questions or comments from the public? RJ?
Just a clarifying question through the chair for Art. Is the pool fence going to be within the 50, or do you know anything about the pool fence?
Through you, Madam
Yes.
Chair, they'll be utilizing an auto cover so that the pool fence won't be required.
Thank you for
And any
that.
fencing that would be installed would be outside of the 50.
Thank you. All right, so if there are no questions or comments from commissioners, Art, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, ma'am, you do.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Linda. I know. We'll give Dave the second on that one. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. So we have Honey and Modenhauer at 71 Baxter Road.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the property owner and applicant, William and Michelle Honey. And William is in attendance tonight in the back row, along with Charles and Meredith Moldenhauer, and Charles and Meredith are back here also. This is a property located at 71 Baxter Road, property that many of you are familiar with. This was formerly owned by John Merson. John had previously sought approval from this commission and was granted waivers from the Zoning Board of Appeals to move this existing structure further away from the Sconset Bluff and closer to Baxter Road. John proceeded to do that move and obtained all necessary certificates of compliance from this commission. John proceeded to then sell the property to the current owners in February of 2020. So at which time the owners that are here tonight took possession of the property. Subsequent to that, the owners received an enforcement order for the installation of an irrigation system and a small section of privet within the buffer zone to the coastal bank. Those are all depicted on the plan that we have submitted. The site itself has not changed from the time that they received possession from John. It was basically the dwelling is located as close to Baxter Road as it could be at the time. There's a vegetated lawn to the east towards the bluff. And there was a privet that was set at the backside of the lawn. You then had approximately, at the time, approximately 20 to 30 feet from that privet to the eroding bluff. This is in an area where the former bluff walk did exist. It no longer exists at this property. It has since eroded away. And if you were to go over the privet and go to the top of the bank now, you could physically step at the top of the bank, but underneath you, it's undercut like it is many ways along Baxter Road. The property itself contains approximately 12,458 square feet. There is a common way of 30 foot wide to the north of the property, which is a common way that went from the intersection essentially of Bayberry Lane and Baxter Road to the bluff itself. That area is open to the public. There was an open area that hasn't changed since they bought the property. At their shell driveway, there was an opening in the privet at the front. The current owner has never restricted or asked anybody to leave the property, obviously, when they use that common way. As part of the application, the enforcement order, again, was the placement of the irrigation system. But there was also a section of privet installed across, extending on the easterly privet on their property across the common way. There is no opening in that privet. It does act as kind of a buffer between the edge of the common way area and the top of the bank. And again, I'd estimate this probably, if you were to step over, it's a low privet. It's not a high privet. If you were to step over it, you're at the top of the bank within about 20 or 30 feet. So to recap, the two activities was the placement of the irrigation system and also the placement of approximately 30 feet of low privet within that common way. The resource area itself here is strictly the vegetated or the eroding coastal bank. The placement of the irrigation within the existing lawn area, we feel, does not in any way harm the resource area itself. And we're happy to talk further about the small placement of the 30-foot section of the privet that was installed in the common way. I have spoken to the owners. I know there has been some concern about whether there's been any type of way to block this way. That's not the case. They'd be happy if someone wanted to post this as a common way. What you do have right now is you come up their driveway, you go through the opening, and you can walk down and you can walk to the bluff. The area to the left, there's a wooden cover which covers up the towns. There's a pressure, a water tank, and that basically that area that's partially located within that common way. So access typically has always been towards the center of it. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. The owners are here, and we've filed this notice of intent essentially to validate the work that was previously completed. And happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners?
There are. Thank
Ian?
you. So Paul, my understanding is that when John owned it, he was careful to keep the common way completely open. And so the subsequent owners have actually planted privet at both ends. And I think most members of the public would be forgiven for not realizing that there was a common way there. And I appreciate that they've offered, well, I'm not sure what their offer is about putting a sign up, but I'm concerned that they've put the privet there in the first place.
Okay. If I could, I mean, I did all John's work. So
Yeah.
the privet at Baxter Road has not changed. That's the way it was when John sold the property. That curve went around the shell driveway and there was an opening there. When John sold the property, I did the survey for him. That's always been that way. They did add this privet here. I mean, that's the only privet that they added. This privet was as it was when John sold the property. And that occurred at some point when John had ownership. And in fact, I don't know who did it. At one point, when you came to that opening, there were actually shells, painted shells that were on the ground that said, I think, way or public way, that were kind of placed in that general area. You'd have to know they were there, but they were there. So what they did do was this, Ian, right here. That clearly was placed. But there was no change to the front.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay.
Because I was under the misapprehension, apparently, that the privet on the Baxter Road. But I'm pleased to hear that they would be happy to have an indication that it is a common way.
Yeah, one of the posts that they typically, whether it's the granite ones or the wooden ones, I mean, again, and they've seen people walking down towards the edge. I mean, I think the one that they put on the eastern end is probably a safety issue at this point, because a lot of people they'll walk right up to that edge and not know that it's undercut. I mean, and it's also not a 6-foot privet. It's kept and maintained as low, so you could walk and just step right over it. I mean, if there was an opening to be put in it or left the way it is, I think it provides some form of safety, at least for people who aren't familiar with that area. So.
Any other questions, Linda?
I knew this access well, I knew the house well, I knew John very well, and I do remember going through that cut on the Baxter Road side. It was kind of that weird right off the edge of the driveway. We can require that the privet at the end of the bluff to keep people from falling off the bluff. It's very unstable at that end. We can require that they keep the foliage no higher than 3 feet so people can look over. That's something that we can do.
We could do that. Yes, we could definitely condition that.
It was never opened all the way. It was always very overgrown from both the north side and the south side. That's a pretty old growth hedge there from John's side. And the one on the north side, it's a pretty overgrown there also. So it was never opened to full width. Most of those guys aren't. Those things going all the way up to the lighthouse aren't. But I just want to make sure if we left the privet, we could condition that.
Yes, yes.
What is our
definitely.
position normally on people who put irrigation in their lots on the bluff?
So for me to see privet kind of going within the 25, because it looks like it goes within the 25, privet is non-native. And generally speaking, we would not allow that species in this location.
But the irrigation itself,
Generally speaking, we'd want that outside of the 25 as well. Yes. All good questions. Any other questions? I know, Paul, I am concerned that that it is a privet hedge and not a native species, as privet does, even maintaining it at just 3 feet. It requires a fair amount of maintenance to do that. And then you have individuals on both sides cutting it, multiple times in a season, probably adding to destabilization on that site. Would there be any move to plant a different species that might stay lower and be native?
Well, we'll ask the question to the owners, but just to be clear, this privet here was previously there. This was previously installed and permitted through the original certificate of compliance.
Okay.
The only privet that they added was 30 feet on the right of way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I think it's.
And that is at the 25, the privet's approximately at what the 25 was the last, at the eroding bay. I'm sure it's changed a little bit right now, but, and then the sprinkler heads were also outside the 25.
Okay. So it's the older privet hedge that's now moved within the 25.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it might be wise to switch to a native species in that 30 feet or have something else to
And
demarcate.
it's pretty vegetated behind the privet too. Is that what's it? That's just natural. That's never been touched from here, from where the privet was there. So.
Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners? Not, I can open it up to the public for questions or comments. Looks like we don't have any. So Paul, what would you like to do here?
Well, I would like to close.
Okay.
I mean, I think I from what I'm hearing, I think that the sprinkler system at least can be, I mean, they now understand that any work on the property requires approval from this commission. Essentially most of the properties within the 100-foot. And then we'd prefer to leave the low privet, as I said, the condition of keep that privet at a certain height would be fine too. And obviously going forward that, acknowledgement that the common way would not be blocked,
Okay.
so.
And marked, yes.
Yeah.
And then Paul, would you be all right with a condition that as irrigation moves in the 25, because there are sprinkler heads very close, that they would be removed at that point?
Well, I think that the 25 is probably close as ever shifting. I think maybe if we come up with more of a, if the blank gets within 10 feet, 15 feet of the existing hedge, that they'd be looking to, maybe do something with something along that line. Because the 25 right now is, one storm and all of a sudden it's,
Right.
it's 20. So, but I think if there was a lesser number that maybe the commission felt more comfortable with, is something we could maybe, discuss.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Jeff, yes.
the last most similar project we did kind of in the same area, we had a condition, and I apologize for not including in the draft, that required some sort of work or modification be done at 15 feet.
Okay.
That's what we've done previously.
All right. Well, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
You
this
do have
one?
all of the required information. Yes.
Okay. So Paul, you'd like to close. Is there a motion to close?
I'll make that motion.
Right, motion made by Linda. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the property owners for attending.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
We have to do it at the HCC and the ZBA and the planning board. When we close a hearing, we don't make a motion. I know it drafts. But we don't have to state what the conditions are. Jeff just creates it out of our discussion.
Yes, so sometimes he'll have pre-drafted conditions depending on the complexity of the project, but those will come at the end. We'll discuss potentially at this meeting or the next meeting.
Next meeting, we'll do.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So just to add to that clarity a little bit, the notices of intent are heard as actual advertised public hearings, required notifications, orders of conditions are heard during the separate public meeting section. So the commission can deliberate and can accept whatever comment they need. They don't have to. No,
Right.
correct.
All
It
right.
stays a lot of permit bartering away.
Yes. So this moves us on to Colby Crenshaw at 24 Almanac Pond Road.
Thank you very much. Brian Madden from LEC Environmental Consultants. Great to see everyone in person. Representing the Crenshaws. This notice of intent is being filed to address some unauthorized cutting activities that occurred on the property earlier this year. The property abuts the windswept bogs and is basically ringed by bordering vegetated wetlands on the property to the north, east, and south. And then there's some wetlands across Almanac Pond Road. There's also a floodplain that comes onto the property as well. And most of the cutting that took place was clearing out greenbrier, foxgrape, some of which did encase some shrub coverage. And no mature trees were cut during any of that work activity. There was kind of variable extents of some levels of grubbing activity that took place. But generally speaking, the root systems are intact of the pre-existing vegetative conditions. And I've been out there several times monitoring the regrowth, met staff out there as well. And I did submit some recent photos from a couple weeks ago. Essentially what we're proposing to do is continue to monitor and check back in later this growing season. What I like to do is submit a monitoring report in September and maybe meet with you all at the October 7th meeting, discuss where we're at in terms of regrowth. And then maybe at that point in time, provide some additional recommendations for enhanced plantings if necessary to fill in any areas. But generally speaking, things are starting to regrow. We're showing good signs. There is one distinct area on the northern portion of the property that we identified on the site plans that seems to be more stripped and is not regrowing. So what we're proposing to do there is replant with arrowwood, high bush blueberry, sweet pepper bush, and a seed mix of little blue stem, Pennsylvania sedge, and red fescue. And portions of that do occur within the 25-foot buffer zone. At this stage, we would like to plant that in September or October, and then continue on with the monitoring of that area as well. The areas that were cut in the southern portion of the property was a tupelo grove in and around that area that did extend into the wetlands. But typically, I think the cutting over there was not as much. I mean, typically in a tupelo grove, you may have like a monoculture of mature trees with minimal to little ground cover or shrub growth. There was some shrubs and or greenbrier that were cut, and it is showing signs of regrowing. There's a lot of ferns that are coming in there as well. Again, I submitted those photographs, but at this point, that's what we're proposing to do, check back in with everyone and then provide recommendations as necessary moving forward. So I'll turn over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Yes, please. So Brian, refresh my memory. Were the tupelo cut?
No
No,
tupelos
okay.
cut, no mature
Thank you.
trees. It was just the
Yeah.
understory that was thinned out a little bit.
I have to say, I appreciate you guys wanting to wait to plant the shrubs until fall, because especially in this drought situation, I've seen lots of mature shrubs going into sites and then needing like
A lot of
so
irrigation.
much water. So I'm glad to see that you're waiting to do that, and they'll hopefully establish better as a result.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention, we did early on get all the slash and excess root material out of the site to help promote that regrowth. So, I mean, things are coming along.
Any other questions or comments, Linda?
I just, I know the lot was involved with the house getting approved, but I was kind of alarmed at just how much, as opposed to clearing around the trees, which will come back. I was just alarmed at the complete clear cut down to the dirt.
Yeah, the
of
northern
some of these
portion.
pictures. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty egregious. I don't know whether it's clear cut to where, because at the very end, they've left everything, but it just seems that somebody should have known that that's what was happening.
Yeah, I think some education was needed there, and I think it was also a scenario of some miscommunication going on.
It is,
Certainly.
yeah, it's kind of mind blowing how often this commission sees cutting like that.
I mean, this is-
Yeah. So, yeah, it is disturbing.
Because we were very particular at the HDC about what the building envelope was. They couldn't keep going,
Mhm.
where the yard was going to be, where the Concom 11.
Right.
built. Well, it was a very tight envelope for a reason.
Yes, well, many of these now, when they come in for this, we'll probably ask them to demarcate the 25 so that they don't cut in there again.
Yeah, I mean, I think The owners certainly are much better educated at this point, as well as the landscapers. And we've met out there several times so far.
Yes. Linda?
I take it, the silt fence is not required in this type of situation to mark where they just don't go beyond there. It would have been removed by now anyway, because the house, that structures are up.
Yeah, so if they had had permitted cutting, we would have had them put up a silt fence, but since this was unpermitted, it just happened.
Yeah, I
not
don't see a need for any silt fencing for the replanting, revegetation areas. It's
So it's pretty clear where you gotta go.
exactly, and it's, I don't see a potential for erosion into the wetlands.
Does the grade go kind of?
It slopes gradually,
Yeah.
but we're not talking about bringing in a whole lot of dirt. I mean, if anything, it's just gonna be the root balls.
Right.
There's enough topsoil still there that will be adequate.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not, we'll open it up to the public. Are there any comments from the public on this application? Looks like no. Brian, would you like to close?
We would, please.
Jeff, do we have everything we'd need to close?
Yes, we do.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Oh.
Deanne has a comment on here. Do you have access to comments coming in from YouTube? It's regarding 71 Baxter. But I just saw.
I'll take a look at it and try to address it.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Keeping us in line. Okay. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to DeBazio at 39 Meadowview Drive, and Commissioner Williams is recused.
Jeff Blackwell and Arthur Reed for the owner. This application is a notice of intent to remove a shed that had been constructed to replace a dilapidated greenhouse. When the DiBiasio family purchased the property, there was some old greenhouses on the property, and mistakenly thinking that replacing the greenhouse with a shed would be acceptable. That work took place, and it has become evident to us that the work took place within the buffer zone to a wetland. So the application is all about subtraction, that is removal of the shed and just replanting the area with grass. So it's that's where we are.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? I'm assuming it'll be replanted with a native like fescue or species, a native
Yeah, I think
grass.
David Haynes covered that in his notice of intent. Yeah.
Just missed the species. Thank you. Would you like, is there any comments from the public? Yes, please come up to the microphone, introduce yourself. And if you have a relationship to the property, please state that relationship.
Thank you. I'm Terry McGovern, my wife Marcy.
Marcy.
Marcy Carlton. We first got this notice, and we're butters. So we're at 37 Meadowview. And we initially assumed that the shack that they were going to tear down, or the structure they're going to tear down, was actually there's a house on the property. It's actually 5 feet from our property line, and it was built there. We don't even know if there was any, the DiBiaso's didn't build it. It was built there before.
Mike
they
Phillips
bought.
built it.
Okay.
And we thought they were going to take that shed out.
Yeah.
Which is actually closer to
The pond.
the wetlands.
And I don't even think there was a permit on that. I'd be curious to find out if that was ever done properly.
Okay,
And the DiBiaseos don't use it. It's just, it just sits there. And it, a long time ago, there was nothing but vegetation there, so we never even saw it.
okay.
Her parents never saw it, and Mike Phillips never told them he was building something
I
back
think
there.
there's something on our property.
But it's 5 feet from, on this diagram that Jeff Blackwell put together. So that's where we noticed, we actually thought that was the dwelling or the house, or whatever you call it, shack. But then this is got. it's
The yellow.
Yellowed out.
Right.
Yeah, not the one that.
So we're kind of curious as if you're gonna take that one out. That seems like it's egregious, but the one over here is even more so.
And it's
Okay.
closer to the water.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We can try and check into any permitting history that might
Yeah.
be involved with that structure.
Good.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Jeff, do you know if through the Concom, there were ever permits for that structure?
Sorry, I'd have to look into that structure specifically, but I could definitely figure that out for sure.
Okay, and what is our time frame? Because I know this has happened before with violations that don't get noticed.
I would say, given what I know of permitting history on this lot, that if that structure's been there that long, it's probably well outside our ability to really take really substantial action without some voluntary want from the property owner.
Okay, that's what I was thinking might be happening. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Would there be a willingness to maybe move the shed that is, it looks like its deck even crosses the wetland line?
Well, again, I think that from as best we know from talking to the owners, that pre-existed, wetlands regulations. That was there long before they bought the property, and it certainly was an old structure from what they say when they did buy it. We'll look into it further, but obviously what we're before you on now is simply the removal of that one structure that definitely was built without a permit, without any notice of intent having been filed, and would have required one. And again, misunderstanding from the owners. They apparently at the time thought that because the old greenhouse that was in that location was in decrepit condition, they could just rebuild the shed, and that issue has come up. So we want to get right as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a follow-up question?
Again, we were more curious since the structure we're talking about was not visible to the abutter, if
Right.
you will. So there was no presentation like we're having today about an abutter's
Right.
response to. And that the fact that it's 5 feet from the property line is, I think that's Jeff's 5'8" or 5.8. Jeff Blackwell's survey. And we actually, my in-laws granted the DiBiaseos a waiver on another structure they built on that property. For the garage. So it kind of, we didn't give them permission to build there, but they didn't build this.
Right, it was before
It
them.
was before them. So I think something in the wetlands area, if you're going to remove one, you probably should remove the other.
Yes,
Thank
I think we definitely see your point. I also, it might be wise to check into vegetation cutting that's been done recently. If the structure wasn't visible until recently, it sounds like maybe some vegetation has come down around it. That I haven't been on the site, so I'm not sure, but is that something you guys have noticed on your site visits?
I'm not aware of any new cutting. I haven't been to the site myself.
Okay. Well, Jeff?
So I do have a comment in kind of our project review, and something that we picked up kind of late, and I apologize to Jeff and Arthur both for this, and I know we alerted this earlier. A number of years ago, if you look on the plan, there's the second story, the 595-foot 595 square foot structure on the kind of the northern side of the property. When that was permitted in 2011, 2012, the wetland line that was shown then is substantially different than this wetland line. It was much closer to the existing dwelling. The original wetland line on the lot was done kind of before soils information was required, and the wetland line shown is much more reflective of that line. And in that subsequent filing, that wetland line moved much further. And I think while I agree that the application in front of you guys is to remove the shed, and regardless of where the buffer zones are, whether it's inside the 50 or closer to the wetland, I would tend to agree that removal of that shed better protects the interests you guys are tasked with. But at the same time, I also want to be sure that we're either accurately depicting resource areas or, a finding is specifically made where we don't talk about approving that wetland line, because I think if that happens, if another filing or an amendment comes in for future work on that site, it needs to be properly reflected by the correct resource areas delineated by the 3 requirements of vegetation, soils, and hydrology.
Okay.
I've
Yes.
never had the specific point come up before, but we're not trying as part of this application to establish the wetland boundary in connection with any other project that would be coming in. And if we can, we'd be happy to stipulate that an order of conditions that we would obtain for the removal of this structure would not bind the commission or the applicant in connection with the establishment of the resource area boundary.
Thank you.
So
Is this-
Jeff, do you have a thought? as to
yeah,
what
so
could be
we've done
worked
that
in there?
before, where you would just simply have a finding that the resource area boundaries are not being approved by the
Yeah.
order of conditions. And then you would still be conditioning the work.
So is this one, because they're have an open application, can we ask them to get true resource area boundaries to submit as part of this application?
I mean, you certainly can. I mean, that's to your question, but just to kind of explain what happened again, just to be sure, is when this was originally done, vegetation was the only requirement. And we see this happen quite a bit, especially in areas like this where they're kind of low lying and generally pretty flat. And there's a water source or a water body kind of in the middle. When they came back in the early 2010s, the state then and the local bylaw required vegetated wetlands to be delineated by vegetation, soils, and then the third one, kind of the tiebreaker if there's a tie, is that other forms of hydrology. They had, at the time, they had someone come out, review it, staff reviewed the wetland line at the time, and that wetland line moved pretty substantially through what was lawn area at the time, because the hydric soils were presenting there. And if you really pick through the veg, you could find things like marsh pennywort and things like through the lawn that's kind of expected in those cases. So that's what kind of happened. And that's why I wanted to bring it up at the meeting tonight, because again, I don't think it necessarily impacts the removal of the shed, if that's the only aspect of the project. Because I think that's a gain, like I said, whether that's inside the 50 or inside the 25 or inside the wetland, the structure is removing from an area that it's not compliant. So, but I at least wanted to make everyone aware.
So I have a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Through you to Jeff. So when were the wetland delineations that are on this plan established?
That is a better question for the other Jeff involved.
The other Jeff.
Yes.
Jeff, you know?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, David Haynes delineated this wetland this year for this application. And the soil data forms are included in the application.
Thank you. So my question again, I guess through the chair to Jeff, is so why don't we accept it delineated as such?
So the delineation that he submitted is just vegetation. And I think we're not in
Got you.
complete agreement with that
Right.
delineation.
Got you.
Okay, so we
Thank
need
you.
more information.
We would if you are wishing to pursue an exact delineation here.
All right. So this one's a little bit messy.
Yeah, I mean, by assumption that David's current delineation, is probably right. I mean, David knows what he's doing, and I assume that he's that in connection with the current rules that he would have delineated accurately. But as I said, and the difference is, as was indicated, is between the way in which the line was being calculated back at the time of the prior work and the present time. But that having been said, we're not trying in connection with some ongoing project to have this line established for any reason. It doesn't make any difference to us. So if we can proceed as indicated to allow this structure to be removed without in any way prejudicing the position of the commission to review the plan again, if as and when some other project comes in, that's absolutely fine with us.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at this point, would you guys like to close?
Yes, we'd like to.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, you do.
Okay, is there a motion to
Move
close?
to close.
Motion made by Ian, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dave, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, so that moves us on to amended orders of conditions. We have Bayless at 50 Eel Point Road.
Good afternoon, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 50 Eel Point Road. What you have before you is a request for an amendment. The wetland on the subject property is a small isolated wetland that's down in a depression. It's held by a little clay lens. Previously, there had been a project approved that allowed for construction of a driveway, retaining wall, and a secondary dwelling that was outside the 50-foot buffer, but partially inside the 100-foot buffer. The applicants would like to reconfigure the development so that the previously approved driveway and secondary dwelling are going to be relocated outside the 100-foot buffer. And they'd like to do a pool and shed in the area where those were previously located. All structures will be outside the 50-foot buffer, all grading and alteration, with the exception of the previously approved well, are also outside the 50-foot buffer. Plan shows an orange silt fence line along the 50-foot buffer, again, except for that area where the well was previously approved. We're proposing a retaining wall that will vary in height from 2 to 6 feet along its length, and a small amount of grading outside the 50. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners?
Well,
Ian?
the obvious question, Madam Chair, which how many feet is the bottom of the pool to groundwater?
The wetland is down at approximately 7.2 feet. It's held by a small clay lens. When we dug the well, which is about 27 feet away from the wetland, we didn't encounter that same clay lens there. So it's a really little isolated kind of cup wetland. The pool is up at elevation 16. And test pits in that area or nearby showed that we were going down 10, 11 feet of clear sand. So we don't anticipate any 2-foot groundwater issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, Maureen?
Yes, through the chair, looking at where the retaining wall comes down by the pool and then goes down towards the bottom, the proposed shed, you are right on the 50, if I'm reading that right.
We're approximately 3 feet off, 3 to 4 feet off on this scale.
Yeah, so that's always something that concerns me because it's easy, for that kind of, when you're up against the wall, literally, and you're putting in a wall, is there any way that this could be, you give yourself some more breathing room there? Because I don't know what the building issues might be, but that just seems really, pushing matters to have that retaining wall as well as, the So it looks like there's some kind of thing next to the shed on its left side. I'm not sure if that's a deck or maybe just a line, I'm sorry. But that. but
No,
retaining
that's just
wall-
a dimension line, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, that's, right.
Um,
That's so close. I was wondering if is there a way to move that out of the way?
We've actually been closer on a number of other projects, including recently 80 Millbrook. We're very careful to go out there and stake the limit of work, prior to construction, because we know what will happen if we're over that line. So everything, we actually left ourselves a little more room than we often do on this retaining wall, so that we can get our footings in and everything in and be outside that 50-foot buffer. And with, the survey work that will be done prior to that, if we're over on our as-built, we know that we'll be required to remove it. So we'll be extremely careful not to be over.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I can see, Maureen, your point, because that is a location where the silt fence jogs out to allow for the well. So I can see where, if it's not staked well, there could be movement of that line, but you're saying that you'll stake that very clearly. So that
And
they-
that's also the portion of the wall that'll be about 2 to 3 feet high. It's not the tallest portion. So we're not going to have a huge excavation there at that location.
Okay, it's also good information.
That's good information too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I do have a follow-up question, Madam Chair,
Okay, Ian?
which is, do you know where the water comes from for this isolated wetland? And the reason why I ask, I was wondering if the wall would interfere in any way. Although from what you're saying, the water goes straight down rather than running down.
It largely, from what we could tell, it largely goes straight down. This very small isolated wetland, it's in a hole. It's surrounded on all sides by slopes, and I think it's not a very wet wetland. Nobody has ever observed standing water in it. It just vegetation and soils meet the requirements. So we're not talking about any, we've never seen any ponding here over several years of going back to the site. So I think it's just because there's a clay lens right there and it just holds enough moisture because it's low.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Are there any questions or comments from the public? RJ?
Thank you, RJ Turcott for the Nantucket Land Council. I was wondering if staff had ever been out to look at that IVW. In the 2003 aerial image, it looks like there is standing water. I was just curious if it could be a vernal pool, if it's ephemeral at all, if it comes and goes. Just curious.
Thank you, RJ. Jeff, have you been out there?
Sorry, I told everyone to use their microphones and I turned mine off. Yeah, I've been in that wetland 3 or 4 times at this point now through the various applications. And I think what we tend to see there is, I think Mark described it pretty accurately, is there's a little lens of clay that comes up where water sits long enough to create some hydrology, but I've never honestly looked for any, obligate species specifically, nothing like fairy shrimp, but in our observations there, I've personally never seen standing water in it in various times of the year, but I have no doubt at the right time there probably is standing water in it, but I don't think it's not consistent enough that I would picture it as, a typical vernal pool where there's a period of every year where there is water being actively held in it. I think it's probably more related to, weather conditions and what's happening in wetter years. It probably is a little bit. So it's certainly possible, but I've personally never seen anything. I've never seen like water staining on leaves or branches or anything in there that screams to me vernal pool. This strikes me as more of the, kind of typical, clay layer, perched water table kind of thing where it just comes in, goes through and sits and dissipates from there, but nothing really collecting for longer periods of time.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
That is an excellent question, though.
That is. Any other comments from the public? All right. Jeff, do we have everything we would need to issue the amended order?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Mark, would you like us to issue tonight?
Please.
All right, is there a motion?
Also move.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion made by Mark, seconded by Linda. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
I know, good. It'll be a tough one to break.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So just as a reminder to everybody, when these get passed around, you need to sign your name and keep passing, except for Dave. Dave, you get to hold. This is a signed task.
Yes.
That's the task of the guy on the end.
We'll get back into the routine of it.
I know. Haven't had to do it in a long time. So
I know.
Borrow my pen.
I didn't even bring a pen.
All right.
if someone needs a pen, I have extras.
Yes, I have extras
thank
too.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, so that will move us on to Nantucket Pond Coalition, Eastern Shore of Hummick Pond.
Good evening. It's good to be back. So my name is Sam Keffer-Stan, and I serve as Mass Audubon's Nantucket Wildlife Sanctuaries Director. And we, Mass Audubon, in conjunction with the Nantucket Pond Coalition, are requesting an amended order of conditions for permitted invasive species removal and control project along the northeastern shore of Hummick Pond. The project was initially permitted on September 6, 2017, as the NPC received an order of conditions for work on the eastern shore of Hummick Pond. The existing order was granted an extension on March 5th, 2020, and is current until September 20th, 2023. The order covered management of a significant population of the invasive species common reed or Phragmites australis along the southeastern shore of Hummick Pond. And it was an area approximately 4,550 feet long and about 5.2 acres of Phragmites. The notice of intent filed in 2017 sought approval to treat Phragmites along the entirety of the eastern shore of Hummick Pond and proposed the project be undertaken in multiple phases as resources became available to support further treatment. The order of conditions issued for the project by the Nantucket Conservation Commission covered the phase 1 area proposed within the notice of intent, and that any expansion of the treatment area require an amended order of conditions or a separate NOI. That being said, we, Mass Audubon, and the Nantucket Pond Coalition are requesting that the same treatment regime be utilized and the project area be extended to include the shoreline of Lost Farm Wildlife Sanctuary, which is approximately 4,140 feet long and encompasses about 5.05 acres of Phragmites or common reed. Our field survey indicates conditions on the additional treatment area as representative of the area that was treated in the southern reaches of Hummick Pond. Project management to date under the existing order commenced in August of 2018. Glyphosate-based herbicide AquaPro was applied with foliar spray via Marshmaster, and which allowed for downward application to minimize herbicide drift. Dead stalks were then mulched in place 3 weeks to a month after the herbicide application, and subsequent treatments were undertaken in the September of each year since, and all of those subsequent treatments have been substantially lighter than the previous year. So the additional work would represent a 5-year campaign to remove and control Phragmites, as has been conducted at other locations on island, including Long Pond, Myacomet Pond, and the southern portion of Hummick Pond. To be added to our request in the amended order of conditions, in addition to extending the treatment area, we are also requesting to utilize Amazamox under the trade name Clearcast, in addition to AquaPro. We would prefer Clearcast, but would ask approval to utilize AquaPro as needed be granted as well. The mode of action for Clearcast is similar with foliar application and absorption into the root system, but Amazamox inhibits an enzyme in amino acids found in plants. And what makes that approach so appealing is that those amino acids are only found in plants and not present in mammals, birds, fish, invertebrates, et cetera. So making this treatment specifically toxic to plants. So I feel that I've provided a summary of the work and I'm open to your questions. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Like, no. I know I was initially skeptical of these projects with, just the large scale herbicide application, but over the years I have really seen the ecological benefit. So I'm happy to see this extending on Hummick Pond to hopefully return those native ecosystems to the edges.
And when it was first muted, we asked for, aquatic analysis for aquatic life, and it seemed that it passed with flying colors.
Yeah.
So I just for the record too, and I apologize for interrupting. I will say to every Pond Coalition project to date as well, they've always managed to also provide all of their monitoring reports on a timely basis, and have done a pretty excellent job in meeting all of the requirements of their permit. So I think I know they wanted to set off to be a model, especially on the bigger ponds for people to follow, but I think from staff perspective, they're doing a really excellent job in managing those projects. And I think Hummick Pond and Long Pond especially are happy for their involvement, and they seem to be much happier places for wildlife and plants.
Are there any questions from the public on this one? Yes, so make sure to introduce yourselves at the microphone. And if you are a butter, please state that.
Hi. Sorry.
That's all right.
Christine and Bruce Hermansdorfer, we are abutters of the Audubon property. And we got the letter from Sam. And I guess my big concern is how this how this might or might not affect honeybees. I'm a beekeeper, our neighbor's a beekeeper, and there's probably like 6 or 7 of us in that area that keep bees. And I know that the Aqua Pro has glyphosate in it, and that is, I mean, what I've read is can affect honeybees. In my bee culture magazine, very recent, they said it's not the glyphosate, it's the inert ingredients like the surfactant. And I don't know what's in, what was it? Mazamox. I have no, first time I've ever heard of that. So that's basically why I'm here, just concerned about
the honeybees,
pollinators.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important concern. From what I know about pollinators being impacted by like glyphosate type products is they have to be actively foraging on those flowers. So I don't know, this is kind of embarrassing. I don't know enough about the Phragmites flower. I think it's wind pollinated.
Yeah, it's not for bees.
Yeah. So in that case, it really wouldn't most likely have a large impact on pollinators in that area.
So it wouldn't have a big drift or.
No. The goal of this project is to really be spraying just at that location. And that's why they have this marsh master that can get really right over those plants. And they have very strict rules about wind. And they can only spray when there's very low wind speeds so that there isn't drift to other areas.
And is there any thought about doing this spraying maybe when bees aren't foraging, like during the heat of the day? Or
I'm not sure. Can you remind us of the timing of this one, Sam?
I don't know that I can speak to the time of day, but in terms of the time of year, it would be late August, early September.
Okay. Yes, that's it.
Well, those are important questions.
Okay.
Yeah, and important
Well,
concerns.
Does that alleviate your concern?
I think so.
Oh,
I
good.
know, I still don't really like the idea of it, but I like the idea of getting rid of the Phragmites.
Right. And
I would
ultimately,
love to get rid of the blue-green algae.
ultimately getting rid of the Phragmites should actually help the bees because we'll have native species in there that would have flowers that would actually feed those bees and species. Yeah, that's the hope. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Could I respond to Christine? I
Yes.
just wanted to say she actually gave me a call and discussed her concerns, and that was a reason to ask for the amendment for ClearCast, given it cannot bind to invertebrates. So.
Thank you.
And Sam, do you intend to, but you did actually mention that you wanted to be able to use both chemicals, right?
That's
So-
right. Yeah, I mean, ClearCast is certainly preferred.
And why wouldn't you use that exclusively then?
Availability, but if it were the wish of the commission, we could move forward strictly with ClearCast.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. You also sometimes have, like, there's always outliers and species that would respond better to one chemical treatment than the other. So sometimes mixing it up slightly would help actually eradicate the Phragmites in
Yeah,
some
I think,
cases.
I think we've also seen over time on these projects, especially that after the first couple doses where it's sprayed and it's the marsh master, they really get down to, someone on foot who's doing direct application to plants. So it's not quite the same broadcast method. So I think over time, hopefully you get down to even, clip and drip where you may be using something very targeted on something that's hung in. I know at Long Pond, it's kind of gone that way where the marsh master was in for the first 2 years and then was a guy with a backpack for a little bit. And then it has really gotten down to just spot treating a stem here or there that's come in. So if it goes according to plan as well as can hope, you really don't see that kind of big concern of herbicide being broadcast anything significant outside of the first couple treatments.
Thank you, Jeff.
I have one more comment. I live right on Long Pond, and I saw a deer at the pond's edge for the first time in 35 years. With the Phragmites gone, it was, I mean, obviously deer have their own issues, but to see a species being able to access some habitat that it couldn't before was a good thing.
Yes, thank you. So Sam, would you like to close this tonight?
Yes.
Jeff, do we have everything we need to issue the amended order?
Yes, you do. I'll make that motion.
All right, motion made by Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to give it to Maureen. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
And that'll move us on to the public meeting, request for determination. We have Charles W. Moores and Harriet K. Moores, trustees at 14 Tatamo Way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Blackwell, here for the Morse family. This application is for to abandon a 1980s era conventional septic system. The leach field for that system is within the 25 to 50 foot setback to the wetland boundary. And to replace that system with a enhanced treatment or IA system, and the new leach field is proposed to be more than 100 feet away from the wetland boundary. I received a call from Joe this afternoon. My survey had taken place back in late fall of 2020.
Yeah.
And since then, the owner, Mr. Moores, who has owned this property for over 40 years, had undertaken some work between the house and the pond, which is not reflected on my plan, and I wasn't able to get out to the site today. But the site inspection, I believe by Joe, revealed that a patio or an area of pavers had been put down just off the deck. And when I spoke to Mr. Morris today, he said that he'd put those pavers down so he could get his grill away from his house and off of his deck, and did not realize that that would be something to be reviewed by the commission. And also there'd been damage to a bulkhead that has existed for, 40 years or more. It actually shows on two previous applications to the commission. It'd been damaged fairly extensively in some storms over the last couple of years. And Mr. Moore's expressed to me that he had extended on either end of it. So these are matters that require submission of a notice of intent. And Mr. Moore's supplied a letter, if I could.
Yes.
Provide that letter to the commissioners, where he acknowledges this requirement without a notice of intent. And he has authorized me to update my survey and has hired Brian Matt to prepare a notice of intent for the DOTs. This work that was done without a permit.
Thanks, Joe.
What we would like to do, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you go.
But just the site plan that you gave us, the pink printing is smeared, like it's hard to read the
Oh.
words that are in pink.
It is.
Yeah, on the scan.
Sometimes red has a hard time staying.
Right, so
Yeah.
but it's hard to see what the changes were. Does this include what you were just talking about? Oh, so you're gonna, this will be redone in any event.
I need to update, this is the bulkhead that I was speaking of. And then it's my understanding that the patio stones are right off these steps. As it comes off the deck, that's where he's placed his grill.
Oh, right, okay, so right at the 25.
I do request that we could go forward with the RDA so that the septic system upgrade and removal of the non-compliant septic system could go forward. That's a positive, I think, and there's no doubt about it. It's positive for the health of the pond and reduction of nitrates. And Mr. Moore's letter recognizes and commits to filing a notice of intent within the next month and a half.
Okay,
So I would like to go forward with the septic part of the work on this RDA.
thank you, Jeff. And Jeff Carlson, that's possible. And if they don't formally submit an NOI, then we would just give them an enforcement to do so, correct?
Yeah, you certainly could. I mean, you could issue a cease and desist and issue it into formal enforcement. If you choose to go that route. I know we just wanted to make sure at a staff level that the work on the bulkhead to make sure that it hasn't expanded or something happened. And then obviously the unpermitted work got addressed. And we had originally requested, Mr. Blackwell tonight to say, we'd recommend continuing to get that addressed. But if you all feel comfortable with the septic work going forward and the assurances that a notice is coming for the unpermitted work, then, that's certainly within your discretion to do.
We'll hold you to it, Jeff.
Yeah. Are there any questions? It looks like Linda has a question.
So we could approve part of an application and hold the other part of the application?
Yeah, so this is just a request to determine if they actually need a formal application, because this is out of the 50 and it's for a septic upgrade. They tend to be fairly straightforward and can go just under an RDA. The second piece will require a notice. It sounds like they're going to voluntarily submit a notice.
Okay, so we can bifurcate the request.
Yes. Jeff, do you have a better explanation than I just gave?
I think that was pretty good.
Okay.
Maybe not all the words I would have used, but I got the point across.
You like that word bifurcate?
Bifurcate is an excellent word.
Any other questions from commissioners? Jeff, what would staff recommend for this one?
Yeah, so I think with that, I think we would probably, from the discussion, recommend that -3 allowing the work specific to the septic system to go forward without filing a notice of intent, but also, maybe we'll add something in that blank that says, a notice of intent needs to be filed to, rectify the unpermitted work for the patio and to clarify the work on the retaining wall adjacent to the pond and kind of the condition blank that's there.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to approve as conditioned.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries
Right.
unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get that to you guys to sign later. We don't have that one with us, so.
Um,
Nope, you guys can all come see the new digs. I know we're all there at the old fire station.
Yeah.
It's an excuse to come visit.
Reminds me of Halloween's past. All right.
You are that old.
We might, you never know, Linda, we might have candy. I'll be a surprise.
Probably
though.
do.
That used to be where the fair was when I
There
was a
probably
kid.
is.
We're dating ourselves.
When you were a kid.
When I was a
All
kid,
right.
yeah.
Take me back.
So
Yeah, really.
that's going to move us on to orders of conditions. Jeff emailed these out earlier today. Yeah, they came in. They're usually in the afternoon.
Yeah, they were closer to 4 today, so.
So we did not close the Pocomo, so this will start us off at 10 Moores End Lane Realty Trust at 10 Moores End Lane.
So this was the application for the pool on that site. Sorry, I'm having a little issue with my computer all of a sudden. When you need it, it's the one that, the time it doesn't want to work correctly. So it's kind of our standard pool condition. So just to kind of run through them, I know this is Linda's first look at these, so we'll kind of run through them. So typically, Linda, for pool applications, the concerns that the commission has addressed before relate mostly to obviously the discharge of, chemically treated water into the resource area or the buffer zone. Yep. So it's just time of year restrictions and, notice for any sort of pumping of that. Outside of that, I didn't really have any really specific conditions that we were recommending.
Are there any amendments to the order? If not, is there a motion to issue as drafted?
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion made by Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dave. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Honey and Moldenhauer at 71 Baxter Road.
So I originally didn't have any in the draft, but I think from the discussion tonight, just to kind of roll through them really quickly, I would recommend a condition 19 that simply says that the common way shall be marked on the street side with a marker labeling it as such and be maintained open. And then a condition 20 that when the top of the bank reaches within 15 feet of any of the irrigation heads, that they are to be removed and the piping that services them removed from that area as well.
That's good. Yes.
Yes.
And a limitation to the height of the privet on the common way.
Sure. So that.
I think it was 3 feet.
Do you want to set that 3 feet?
Exceed.
Yeah, so there would be then be condition 21 that the privet on the common way on the parallel to the bluff shall not exceed 3 feet in height.
Yes. Any other additions? And if-
Move to approve as amended.
All right, is there a second? Seconded by Linda. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, that carries unanimously. And I know we don't have drafts for Crenshaw or DeBazio, but are there any thoughts on Colby Crenshaw, 24 Almanac Pond Road?
So if you want, I think from the discussion, I was thinking about drafting probably are kind of our standard monitoring conditions for restoration areas where we have that, twice a year photo documentation of what the site looks like for all of the separate areas. I was also thinking on that site, especially because it happened a couple times before that, at least in the first year, a scheduled visit with staff just to walk through on site, all of them. And we always go inspect those photos anyways, but I think it's always good just to get at least 2 or 3 people to kind of walk through and explain kind of what they've been doing, what they haven't been doing, and to kind of walk through it if there are any issues from there. But I think other than that, I think it seemed like a pretty straightforward.
Maybe some clear markings.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. And we've been starting to include that, but just the clear that the limit of lawn or limit of landscaped area is going to be marked with some sort of permanent marker.
Yes.
So hopefully no one does that again without doing something really stupid.
Yeah. I think that all sounds good. Thank you, Jeff. What about DeBazio at 39 Meadowview? That was straightforward, just with the removal of the shed aspect.
Yep. And I was just going to include the finding that the wetland line wasn't approved by that.
Yes.
I'm curious about the neighbors saying that they now can see the shed.
It is a
So
little-
I did, when I snuck out for a minute, I did catch up with them really quickly. We'll take a little harder look at that to see what's been going on and just try to dig into the history a little bit. We kind of focused on the delineation and just the shed for removal, but we'll at least kick the tires on that and get some sort of, at least determine when it went in and to clearly determine that it's not subject. My guess is it's probably older than me. So it's definitely been a while, but also just something that clearly even gets back to the current owners, or if there's a new owner coming in that says, you can't cut down there without permits. So we understand what's there now and we're paying attention. So
Yeah, possibly should they demarcate their no cut zone as well?
I think the problem with that is I think first we need to resolve
The
the
line.
delineation issue.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
I can
would
work,
make
I can work with them. I'm sure we'll speak to Arthur and Jeff a bit more, and maybe at a minimum, I'll put on my best salesman hat and at least convince them to maybe file an RDA to firm up where that line is so everyone knows.
Thank
So
you.
it would fall under the Methuselah waiver, I believe.
Yes. All right, so that moves us on all the way to other business. Approval of minutes from June 24th. Thank you, Terry, for the minutes.
Thank you, Terry.
Did anybody see anything they need to add or amend? Yes. So if not, is there a motion to approve as drafted? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. And then Jeff, it looks like we have an enforcement update, Sconset Beach Preservation Fund, 87 to 105 Baxter Road.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on this. I know the room is kind of cleared out at this point. But from our meeting last week, I had said I was going to try to get a draft to everybody by tonight. But I think between the 4th of July holiday and some other things, I sent it off to our regular reviewers and Nate at Mass DEP to get comments and thoughts on, and just haven't gotten anything substantive one way or the other back from them just from the holiday and that. So I think if we could, we'll probably carry it to the 7/22 meeting and take it up there. And if there needs to be a discussion beyond what the bounds of the regular meeting do, we can always schedule another special hearing if we think it's going to take longer than a portion of time. But I just wanted to, I said I'd have it done for tonight. I got my end done, kind of, but then.
You were moving too. Come on.
Well, we moved this week, so that was out of my hands. I actually had it done the next day because I was like, I have to get it done because we're moving. So, but I think with the 3-day weekend and obviously everyone being busy with the holiday, just wasn't able to get it back. So.
Looks like Mark has a question for you.
Yeah, someone asked at the meeting when we voted on the last Sconset Beach thing, was the escrow account ever funded?
So that's a question that I put forward.
My question 3 times. I've asked that question 3 times.
Is that escrow is specifically held through the license agreement? And I've asked for the copy of that to get sent to me. And I meant to follow up with it again today. I just haven't, but I will have that information prior to that 7/22 meeting as well.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Do we don't need to make a motion to continue this to 7/22.
No,
right?
I just wanted to
Continue.
provide an update in public for everybody. So one, I don't get a million phone calls and emails about why nothing is going on or what's happening, but also I usually when I tell you I'll get something done for you guys, at least try to say where it is if it hasn't appeared. So
Well,
keep
that
everyone
moves
in
us on to reports. So I guess we should have our remaining members report out and then.
So I
update.
think, yeah, the way we've done this in the past is those who have been serving on those committees can provide any updates that they have, but then we also need to go through if anyone wants to go on to a board. We obviously have a position on CRAC that Ian has been serving on, Maureen has been on NP and EDC, and Joe Topham had been on CPC. So at a very minimum, we need to designate someone new to go on to CPC. But I think running through if there are any updates from people first, and then you guys can throw hats in the ring for who wants to move forward on other ones. And
Duke it out.
we've never had a real like big dispute before. Everyone's been
No.
always happy to serve and
I
fix it.
remember us having to
Flip a
flip
digital
flip a
coin.
digital
Yeah.
coin that Seth had for us.
Yeah, that did happen
Wait,
last
wait,
year.
Is that like a Bitcoin?
Oh,
No,
God.
it was just
Oh.
on
You
the
don't flip
iPad.
those.
All right,
If
so
you have extras, you can give them to me. I'll take them.
reports from crack.
So Crack, we had a Zoom meeting with the select board and Arcadis last week. And I'm embarrassed to say I couldn't find my notes. And so the upshot is, I mean, Joe watched it and sort of covered it from his point of view. And I would urge everyone to actually watch it. It was quite informative in some ways and somewhat surprising in others. So they didn't touch on any of the environmental impacts of the geotubes. And so when I asked if they were planning on doing so, they said, my understanding from their answer was basically not unless members of the public weighed in, which surprised me. So whether I'm mistaken as to my interpretation or not, we shall see. And perhaps, shall I ask Vince if he could give me the YouTube, address, or shall I dig it out myself? I'll dig it out myself and ask Jeff to send it forward to you. It was very
It's all right.
interesting.
I have quick access to it. I can even
Do you?
send it right now. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And before I forgot to pass the 2 orders we approved around. So I'm just going to start those down since I'm talking.
All right,
So-
so thank you for that update and we'll have fun viewing material in our emails for when we leave.
Yeah, I meant to sort of give a synopsis of my notes. And so I'm pretty embarrassed I couldn't find them.
We all have those days. So we don't have CPC anymore. Okay, if you have an update on recent meetings, go ahead.
It's pretty quiet. We're beating the bushes for people to apply. The deadline is the end of Friday of September, first Friday of September for open space recreation, housing, and historic preservation. And so anybody who'd like to apply, they can call the office. The application's up online. But right now, we pretty much meet every month just to sign the vouchers, to approve the vouchers from ongoing projects. That meeting's been on before for a long time. So that's pretty much all we are. We're sort of in a holding pattern until applications start coming in September.
Okay, thank you for that. And that moves us on to NP and EDC.
We have not met, so I have no report.
Okay. Good to know there. All right, so committee appointments.
So I'd like to continue on Crack.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
is there a second?
Second. I'm
Um,
sorry.
What was the motion?
For Ian to continue on.
Yes.
Lost notes notwithstanding.
Yes. So all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. CPC is open, so CPC,
I'd like to be on that if possible.
okay.
I'll make a motion with Marcus on the CPC.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Right, all in favor? Aye. That carries
And
unanimously.
I'm gonna throw my head in for NTC. I was on it for 10 years, but the only reason I've been asked to come back on is because they're starting to do area plans again. And I wrote the Surfside one, the Branch Point one, I wrote the Dual one, Tom Nevers one that was involved with Wisconsin one. And they're now coming into doing some of the other area plans, especially around town, that they haven't done. And the only one that has ever done any of them that's on there for now. So
Okay.
I'd like to go back on NPDC, just get the area plans done.
Okay.
Well, hopefully finally, every area.
Maureen, were you wanting to remain in?
Well, I
NPDC?
would like to. I mean, Linda, I think, would it be possible for you to, because the area plans are one piece of it, but you have a lot of issues involving transportation and other things that I'm very interested in. So I would like to stay on as the Concom member. But I know the area plans, as I'm a little bit involved with the Nantucket one, I mean, that they certainly can use help. I mean, so maybe there's a more informal way to do that, Linda. I just don't know.
Not really, because I chaired the other ones and there's a lot of work, obviously with transportation, there's a lot of public hearings. There's a lot of things that go into them, 9 tenants that are involved with an area plan. And they're quite lengthy and extensive, and I'm not necessarily with the kind of time in unless I'm actually tasked with doing that, officially tasked with the NPDC to do that. Because it does take quite a lot of time. It took us a couple of years for Surfside. Wisconsin was rewritten. And Dual, I miss him terribly, but he was the guiding light in Tom Nevers, and we worked really well together. I worked on St. Paul's, all the CPC grants, being those to St. Paul's, and that's finally done. So I'd like to go back on. If I have,
Nope.
I don't want to really get involved if I'm not on the NPDC because it becomes a jurisdictional issue.
So through you, Madam Chair, to Jeff?
Yes, Ian.
Is the protocol that the two people who've thrown their hats into the ring go outside while we vote?
I mean, you guys can decide however you want. Someone can make a motion and do it. If they want to step outside, you can, or if you guys want to cast by paper.
I can handle it.
So
Okay.
it's all up to you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
It's your board.
All right.
Just as long as you follow open meeting law, you guys can do whatever you want.
Okay.
I nominate Maureen to continue as NPDDC representative.
Okay, so motion's been made. Is there a
I
second?
support that, yeah.
Okay, so there's a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that carries. And Linda, maybe next time around.
Not like I'm not on CPC.
Yeah, we do.
I'm housing authority.
Yeah, you're busy. All right, so that moves us on to monitoring reports. We had a few in our packet. Are there any questions about the monitoring reports?
So yeah, just to kind of run over, we typically just put these on, Linda, just to, if there are any specific questions. If there are issues that when they come in, we usually try to address them before they get to you guys with questions or concerns. So I think we're happy with all three of those, especially the personally, that project at 36 Pocomo, which was kind of a nightmare for a while, has really kind of come back together well. And the eelgrass project's always nice to see good progress like that. So I think we're really excited about both of those. So we're happy.
All right, well, that's good. I agree, the 36 Pocomo, it's nice to see that completely turn around from where it was.
Yeah, that was a
bad one. That Linda is one that was a complete clear cut of 36 Pocomo. So
That was a little interesting.
yeah, it's a positive turnaround. Yeah. All right,
Not a
so
lot.
that moves us on to commissioners' comments. Any comments, Maureen?
Yes, I wish that I didn't have to make this comment, but I'm going to. In today's newspaper, there were, to my mind, startlingly intemperate comments made by the SBPF and supporters. These comments actually included a comparison of our actions to that of a lynch mob, as well as being on a mission from God and having a mind of our own. The first is offensive to most people and most especially African Americans. The second is unintentionally accurate. I believe we do have a mind of our own in that we are independent. And I think we need to keep that. But I felt it was important to call out those comments because they have nothing to do with regulatory issues, with anything else, and are things that further divide people, and especially the lynching comment. I'm still just speechless that that was made.
Who said that?
It was a letter by Mr. Hofstadter.
Yes.
Famous Amos.
Yeah.
So,
Ian?
Tangential to Maureen's comments. Through you to Jeff,
Yes.
what is the protocol now regarding the letter that we all received yesterday? Asking us to rescind our decision.
So you guys can take, if you wanted to have a scheduled public discussion on that, you could certainly have it as an agenda item. You could simply also, when you deliberate the findings from the previous discussion, you'd be available to talk about that then, if you so choose. But that's kind of at the board's discretion. Obviously, you're looking at it through the lens of an enforcement action. So it's not a scheduled or advertised public hearing. So it's something that just as part of your regular public meeting, you could certainly discuss it as an advertised agenda item. I mean, I don't think discussing that letter right now is in good form, but I do think if you wanted to have a discussion about it and its merits, we could certainly add it to an agenda in the future.
And to piggyback it on to the orders of condition, you were saying.
Yeah.
You could, or you could also, I mean, you could almost have two separate agenda items if you wanted to. One simply focused on discussion of that piece of information separately, and then the enforcement separately, or you could do it together. But I think if you were going to do it together, I think we would probably notice it on the agenda as such, and also make sure that, I mean, we'll obviously get those letters posted up to our regular informational page, but make sure that the public all has that available to be informed and know what you guys are talking about when you guys are having that discussion.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
To you, Madam Chair, to the commission. If we did them separately, would the commission want to do it under other business, or would we want it under, well, it would have to be on other business after orders of conditions. So we would have made up our minds first before reconsidering whether or not to rescind the very orders of conditions that we have approved.
I thought they would both go under other business.
So I think if people are interested in having that discussion, I think I would probably ask council the best order to do that in, because I think they would be of best mind to know how to deal with that. Because I think if you guys were to issue out something, then I think you would be then essentially revoking or rescinding that. I want to make sure that we would get the process right on that, if that's the action that ultimately came. But if you guys are looking to schedule it, I will handle the headache of knowing the order that they need to go in, as long as I know if you guys want it on like the 7/22 meeting or sometime after. If you think it will be a long enough discussion to do it separately, we can set that up as well. But we're happy to schedule whatever and make sure that it's in the correct order.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 7/22 meeting, I haven't seen how long that agenda is, but we could probably put it at the end of that meeting.
Worst case scenario, you can always
Continue it.
continue it.
Yeah.
I just
Maureen?
want to second that. I think we do need to have council's opinion on that, because to rescind an existing enforcement order, I think has to be treated as the same way an enforcement order when we voted publicly to issue that. So I think, so it may not, if that gets to be, if there's a motion made by someone to do that or whatever. I think that would have to be in the public hearing part, but obviously I would defer to George on that.
Yeah, it would probably be George, or it may be even something that may be a question that John Giorgio may handle
Oh,
too.
yeah,
And it's
But
more in
does
his-
the letter require action?
That letter?
Yeah. No.
No, the letter does not
I don't get
require,
the concern here.
Oh, excuse me.
so does not require, you guys don't even have to discuss it if you don't choose to, but
Kind of where I come from.
Okay.
We've made a decision and they can write all letters they want, asking us to rescind or modify or something, but if we choose to just proceed with the enforcement order, we should proceed with that. If that's our intent.
That was our intent.
Yes.
That was our
I
intent.
I am in agreement with you there, Mark. I think it is worth running it by town council to see what their opinion is on it, just to make sure we're are doing the right thing here.
Okay.
But I mean, putting it on as a discussion item doesn't mean the discussion will go anywhere, but acknowledging kind of the receipt, I think is important.
Thank him for his letter.
Yes.
We're saying not to respond to them?
No, I think it should have some response. Right, right, exactly. So
so
we'll see
I
what
think,
George has to
I think
say.
from the sounds of it, and if you guys want to do it by formal vote, you certainly can, but from the sounds of it, at least a majority of the board wants it as a discussion item for the 722 agenda, then we'll also have the enforcement on 722 as well.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, and I'll just make sure I get the order correct, but I'll run that through KP to make sure that the one should happen before the other, what's more appropriate, so.
Okay.
But again, the responding to the letter, even discussing it, there's no action required by you guys in regards to any letter that gets sent in unless it's a formal application for something, so. This is not the
Jack.
case.
Any other commissioners' comments? I have just two. One, welcome Linda to your first meeting.
Yes, welcome.
And then my second, I kind of
we haven't
touched on it
finished yet.
earlier, but I'm concerned, especially about projects within our jurisdiction where plants are getting installed at the wrong time of year. And this is really, I've been going to Pocomo a lot. I think that's not a surprise. I've been mentioning my walks out there. But one of the newer installations installed mature bayberry on the face of the bank the last week of June. And those sprinklers are going off multiple times a day in the summer to water them. And I think when we're looking at these applications, we should really condition them so that the plantings are happening in the appropriate time of year, to not require, water of that level. And then, of course, this year's we're in a drought situation, but to really tighten that up, I think it's important.
Sure. I mean, I think that can all be handled through orders if
Yeah, I think
that's what they're.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I like it.
And I think honestly, once those things kind of become standard, they'll just become part of applications. It'll become habit for everybody.
It'll become
It'll
more
be-
routine.
Be easier and easier to deal.
Do we have the expertise with you and Seth and our plant expert to say, here's the approved list of plants, the pollinators, and when they should be planted, the range of dates? Do we have that?
Yeah, I mean, I
knowledge?
definitely in my 11 years in the landscape world have a substantial understanding.
So
of
that would be
that.
helpful.
Yeah.
So-
And I'd assume Seth does and staff certainly does as
Yeah,
well.
we can, that information's pretty easy to come by, and there's a lot of other groups on island that deal with planting and those kinds of things that
Oh,
provide
good.
that good. And I know I've often talked to even folks like Craig out of like Serving Hydrangea about best time to plant things, and they're always happy to say it. I think his famous words to me are, I would love to sell you that plant 2 or 3 times, but I can't in good conscience do it. So he would rather it go in and not be back for the
hydrangeas.
same things.
Right.
Most of the big landscapers that I work with, they know.
They
They
do.
just don't want to waste money and time. And then they're pushed, some of them are pushed by the HDC. Because if it's a pool, you can't get a CO on the pool, even for liability purposes, unless the plants are in. So there's a lot of planting going in around the pool.
Yeah.
That are just never gonna survive beyond the happy guarantee, which you can't see it.
Right.
So it is.
Oh.
catch-22 there.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, again, in the landscape world, it was, no, we need this for our July 4th party, and it gets planted last minute. Right. So I think
So-
especially within wetlands, we can't be wasting the water to irrigate.
I do, that gives us an opportunity, and not to hold us here longer, but I think maybe also if we start to go down that path a bit, if we put something together that's really good, almost a guidance document for everybody, that may also be something that we could even provide to the HDC and say, hey, this is a problem that we're encountering in our wetland buffer zones, and we're seeing it, and we think that there are ways to deal with it, so people aren't having to screen and rescreen and do those things. That at least we might be able to have a conversation with them about being helpful in there too, and trying to maybe work with them to address those issues that they have, but to do it in a little better way.
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Certainly would waste like less time.
Yes, that is true. Are there any administrator staff reports?
Yeah, I was just gonna remind everyone that if you're looking for Joanne or I, our phone numbers and emails are still the same, but don't go down to Jetty's looking for us. So if you go in, we're in the same building as Health. You'll walk in the door, you'll probably see, since we're on the second floor, you'll run into Ann Barrett probably first in another week or so. You'll probably run into Ann Medina, and we're happy to come downstairs and chat. There's space there to do it. Or anyone who's able and is willing to come on upstairs and say hello. It's kind of a hot mess at the moment, but we're there. And again, anyone that ever has any questions about any applications or things that are going on at the commission, we're always there to help and do that for people as much as you guys need. We're there to help.
Thank you, Jeff.
No, but we'll have JC carry you if necessary.
Well, that's the question I have to ask, because I was involved when they did the commission disability survey. You've moved from a handicap accessible office to a non-handicap accessible office in part of the town. I don't think that's legal under the ADA or the ADA. What have they said to you about handicap accessibility?
So I think that was the purpose, that there's private meeting space available on the first floor, and then we're always able to come down and meet with people as necessary. And all of our files are publicly available on the first floor and online digitally at this point. So
Is it going to come up?
oh, it definitely
I've
will.
already heard it's going to come up.
Yes. We are ready.
An elevator in the
Barely
works.
get up the stairs on the, I was even there, and we all had a meeting on the second floor, and had to fall up those stairs half the time. And if the light didn't work, you had no idea where you were going up there, and there was no window up there. We had a unit in the window. Is that what you've got up there?
There are two windows that are currently up there.
So we don't need.
It almost is kind of brighter than the last office.
Yes.
All right, so I think we're done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Officially, yes. Thank you, everybody. She's cute. She's,
Bundle of energy.
oh my God, she's such a
Does she go on walks
monster.
with you? Or does she walk with you and talk about-
She walks with me on hot